So let's start, huh? So today's topic will be obsessive compulsive disorder. So as the name suggests, obsession means there is continuous thought, continuous impulses that are coming into your brain, and with those obsessions, there is a reaction that is known as the act, an action. So to a compulsive action, there is a previous obsession, obsessive thought. This is known as the obsessive compulsive disorder. So for that, again, we have to think, we have to understand what personality means, right? So let us understand again that our personality is comprised of three things: the unconscious or the id, the ego, and the superego. The unconscious is the child part of you, the most primitive part of you, the part which have the impulsive, which needs gratification, which needs pleasure all the time, and that need has to be satisfied instantly, all in the moment. It cannot wait. It has to have things right now, right there. But that is not accepted in the real world. It is not accepted in the external world. So what happens is ego comes into play. So then in the last lecture, I have explained in detail what ego is. So ego is a barrier between the unconscious and the conscious mind. It's a barrier between the inner and the outer world. So it depends upon the strength of this ego, this filtering tendency, what needs to come out. According to this ego, only certain things, only things which are acceptable in the real world are expressed out, and all that is unacceptable in the society, all that is not needed in the society, that all is repressed back into the unconscious mind. So it depends upon the strength of the ego, what is to be expressed out. And the third part, which develops later in the life. So, for example, the ego develops in the first 3 years of the childhood. In the superego, it occurs later in the age. What is the superego? Superego is the advanced part. It's the latest part, also known as the conscience. It controls our sense of right and wrong. This is known as the morality. This is known as the moral part of yourself. जिसे बोलते हैं sense of right and wrong. It keeps an eye on the ego so that it does not permit the contents of the unconscious into the external world. So it's a kind of a guard. It's a kind of चौकीदार जो आपकी ईगो के ऊपर एक वॉच रखता है कि ईगो कुछ ऐसा एक्सटर्नल वर्ल्ड में परमिट ना कर दे अनकॉन्शियस को, right? And this part, this super ego part, is learned from the parents, from the culture, from the school, from the religion, from the society, and, and it's the strictness part of you, right? So what happens is, in the beginning, at birth, the most primitive part, you're born with your unconscious mind. You're born with your ID. And with that, the moment you step into the reality, the moment you step into the external world, you are now asked to learn the things of this real world. जिसे बोलते हैं कि इस दुनिया में रहना है तो इस दुनिया के तौर तरीके आपको सीखने पड़ेंगे. अगर आप वो नहीं सीखोगे, then you will not be fit to survive in this real world. You will not be fit to live in the society, in the external world. So इसी वजह से ईगो डेवलप होती है और ईगो के ऊपर उसको वॉच रखने के लिए, उसे कंट्रोल करने के लिए एक सुपर ईगो, द मॉरल पार्ट डेवलप होता है, right? So this super ego, it creates the rules, regulations, and discipline. It aims for perfection, which develops around the 5 years of age. ये सब हम कब सीखते हैं? During the school. So that is why this period, this super ego, is also known as the school age part. And its function is to control all the impulses that are coming into the unconscious mind, to which ego wants to express, but still there is a check on the ego to stop it, because the society forbids all those things. Why it brings a check on the ego? This is the question. Because ego has to live, ego have to serve the unconscious mind, because the unconscious mind comprises the 90% of your personality, and the ego and the superego, it is just a 10%. The conscious mind is 10%. So agar ego express nahi karegi, if ego is not expressing the unconscious part of itself, what happens is it creates pressure inside, it creates problems inside. So that is why ego have to serve the three masters. What are three masters? The first and the most important is the unconscious mind. Second is the superego, and third is the external or the reality. So who is the sufferer? It's the ego that suffers the most in between the fight of unconscious and the superego. So that is why superego has to control control the ego part of yourself. So what else ego does is it lays a particular standard on the ego by imposing strict standards. That how should be a life of a person, it imposes on the ego. This is what is needed, and this has to be followed scrupulously. It should not be denied. So if ego fails to do so, it punishes the ego and the person with bad experiences, जिसे हम बोलते हैं guilt feeling, produces severe guilt in the person कि कुछ भी अगर ego unconscious express कर दे तो it punishes it. So it is a punishing part of the conscience. It's the punishing part of the personality. So if it is followed properly, अगर अपनी morality, अपने morals, अपने rules regulations, अपना sense of right and wrong हम बहुत अच्छे से follow करते हैं, then this activity of ourselves, it is rewarded by the superego by feelings of being proud, like this is a good boy or a good girl image, जो हर किसी का कहना मानता है, जो हर कसौटी पे खरा उतरता है, जो हर एक की expectations को पूरा करने में जुट जाता है. That is known as the superego part of yourself, because it has to serve what the society needs from you. Like we study in Cilicia, it wants to have the good impression of itself on the other person. It's a very strong superego part. So amongst three, we should also know what health is. So health is the ego part. So if the ego is strongest, then it should be able to handle the unconscious and the superego. Right? So ego is strongest part among the unconscious and the superego. So it satisfies the needs of the unconscious. At the same time, it does not upsets the superego by taking into consideration the reality of a situation. Because अगर unconscious express नहीं हुआ, ego knows it कि अगर unconscious express नहीं हुआ, it will create havoc in the personality. So it has to be expressed. So ego should be the most important. Ego should be the strongest part amongst unconscious and the superego. Only then, and then the person would be able to lead a healthy life. If somehow the unconscious becomes stronger and the ego becomes weak, like last time we did, anxiety develops. All the anxiety disorders, they develops because of the weak ego. But sometimes it also occurs that the superego is very, very strong. Superego is very, very strict. It does not allow a single penny of the thing to be expressed into the external world. So again, who suffers? It's the ego that suffers. It brings on the other part. So most of the diseases that the person suffers, especially the mental diseases, it's all because of the interplay of ego, superego, and the unconscious mind. This is very important, and this has to be kept in the mind. Like last time we discussed about the anxiety and the panic attacks, it's because of the ego becomes weak, and because of its weakness, it always fears threat from the unconscious world. कि कुछ भी ऐसा बाहर ना निकल जाए, unconscious से ना निकल जाए, जिसे मैं हैंडल ना कर पाऊँ, जिसे सोसाइटी अच्छा नहीं मानती. So this creates an anxiety, and if it is not done, if ego becomes further weak, or if the superego becomes more stronger, it further puts pressure on the ego by creating other type of neurotic problems. So one of them is OCD, obsessive compulsive neurosis. So sometimes what happens is the superego becomes weak, or the superego is not developed. How it does not develop? In persons or in children where the parents over pamper the child, where the parents does not say anything to the child whatever he does. If the child is expressing all the unconscious, if the child is doing anything that he wants to do, and the parents fulfill every demand of the person, of the child, then what happens is the child grows up with weak superego, and these are the children who suffers from lack of any inhibition. They become the criminals. They become antisocial personalities. Why? Because they do not follow the rules and regulations of the world. These patients, they become the shameless persons. They do not hesitate to say anything in the face of other people. They don't hesitate to bring some shameless things into the external world. It's all because of the weak super ego. So super ego has to be there, but it has to have some intensity. It's not the only part, it has to have some characters. So then what happens when you have strong superego? When the superego becomes too strict, it again causes a pressure on the ego. So over strict, जिसे हम harsh superego बोलते हैं, very strict superego बोलते हैं, it is driven by rigid morals. So these are the personalities with a very strong superego, harsh superego. They become very, very rigid. They have very strong beliefs. आप जितना मर्जी उनको बोल दो कि ऐसा नहीं, जितने मर्जी उनको reason दे दो आप, they will not follow your reasons. Like often we see in the religious places, some of the people, they become so addicted, so much judgmental on the religious books कि books में ऐसा लिखा है तो ऐसा ही होना चाहिए, उसके अलावा कुछ भी अलग नहीं होगा. Those books were written in those times, but these things are so rigidly followed by the people who have this strong superego that they do not want to hear anything apart from the thing that is written in the book. You are not allowed to say anything else apart from that. They will not believe in the reasonings. So that is why जितनी लड़ाई हम देखते हैं कि उसने हमें ऐसा बोल दिया, उस धर्म ने ऐसा बोल दिया, इस धर्म ने ऐसा बोल दिया, it's all because of this very strict superego, because the superego is very very judgmental. It's unbending. आप जितना मर्जी कोशिश करो उसको समझाने की, रीजन देने की, they will not bend with your reasoning because it does not follow the reasoning. It only follows the So it also tries to force the ego to act morally rather than realistically. So morals is very important. So it develops self-hatred. So this often happens in the history of child abuse. The persons who have very strong domination in the childhood, they have this strong superego. So what is OCD? What happens is OCD is it's a kind of anxiety disorder where recurring thoughts, unwanted thoughts or ideas, sensations known as obsessions, they come from the internal world or inner world from the unconscious. And this thing, the ego, which have this pressure on it from the inner world, it makes or does something to release that anxiety. And that anxiety is released by doing some compulsive act. And these actions are such as hand washing, checking things, constantly cleaning. These can significantly interfere with the patient's daily activities and social interactions. So it has two parts. One is obsessions, which is the pressure from the inner world. They are very recurrent, persisting ideas, thoughts or images or impulses, which invades the person's conscious mind against his wishes, and person tries to ignore or suppress them. Why? Because ego does not allow those obsessions or those thoughts to be coming into the outer world. And because of that, it produces some defenses. It produces some acts which are known as compulsions. And compulsions are what? They are the behaviors that they occur against the person's wish and are accompanied by a sense of subjective compulsion and a desire to resist them. What are the clinical features? Clinical features are divided into two parts. One is obsessions. Obsessions like disgust with the body wastes, contamination with urine, stool, saliva, germs, etc. There is also a fear that something terrible may happen, fear of death, illness to one's family or oneself. They are preoccupied with symmetry, order, exactness. There is excessive praying or religious concerns. They are very preoccupied with the lucky numbers, magical thinking, or unlucky numbers. They are also have perverse sexual thoughts, aggressive impulses or images, intrusive nonsense sounds, pathological doubts with fear and guilt. And to this, there is another part that is compulsive actions, which are excessive ritualized washing, showering, and bathing, repeating rituals, checking doors, locks, and stoves, cleaning to remove contaminations, touching, ordering, and arranging, measures to prevent harm to self or the others, continuous counting, spitting, etc. So this is obsessions. So what is the psychodynamics of it is there is a problem which arises because of weak ego. What happens here is the unconscious of the primitive mind wants gratification, wants to play, wants things instantly, has its own instincts. So this put pressures on this ego, causing anxiety in the beginning. And then as this phase goes on, superego comes into play and punishing the ego with feelings of guilt and takes strict disciplinary actions. What is not needed should be kept away at all costs. So superego also acts against all the impulses from the unconscious. So ego and superego, they both put pressure on the unconscious. So for this, superego has to be very strict. And because of this over strict superego, many other ego defenses come into play, like reaction formation, undoing, and isolation. So what happens is the unconscious is a primitive mind, the child within you, who don't want anything about the world, who only knows about pleasures and its own instincts, who does not know anything about what is right or what is wrong. So it is the inner program that is present from birth. It is the energy or driving force within you. When unconscious does anything inappropriate which is not acceptable in the external world, it is buried deep down by the ego. So slowly it builds up pressure within the unconscious. The more the ego tries to repress it, more it tries to do the same activity, be it any act or any thought. And because of the fear of punishment from the strict superego, ego changes the stance. All the repetitive and inappropriate thoughts that the ego encounters, it tries to convert them into acceptable acts by defenses of the ego, such as the reaction formation or the undoing. And to all those repetitive thoughts, a compulsive opposite act is introduced. And this is known as obsessive compulsive neurosis. So the conclusion is OCD arises out of combination of the weak ego and harsh superego. OCD is seen as an attempt to control the unconscious coming into consciousness. And there is always a history of domination in child abuse. This could be the major cause of OPD. So, for example, the inner instinct is to play with the dirt. This could be the obsession. Weak ego is unable to control this instinct. कि उसको कुछ गंद मचाना, गंद मचाना, गंद मचाना, but ego does not allow that. So superego takes strict action and forces ego to bring in more defenses like undoing. So this creates the ego compulsion to keep everything clean with repetitive actions. So उसके opposite एक action हो जाएगा जिसकी वजह से हर चीज सफाई 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 होती शुरू हो जाएगी. Another example is he says someone hates his father, which is not acceptable. So ego represses it into the unconscious. This again builds the pressure in the unconscious. Ego then is unable to handle this such pressure, and this again results in impulsive thoughts like my father is bad, and he must die, he must die, he must die. And when this thought comes, the ego part say it is bad. This causes anxiety. But when the ego is unable to control that, it results in expressing it onto the superego. So the harsh superego, as a result, punishes the ego with guilt feelings, feelings of shame. So as a result, ego again tries to take control. So adopts a new phenomena, defenses. To all those thoughts which are repetitive or obsessions is try to control by doing opposite things such as compulsions, like constantly praying about the life of father. Another example, if a person is having sexual impulses, he may resort to excessive praying due to the anxiety and guilt that is imposed on the ego. Another, if there is an inner feeling of chaos, it is encountered by desire for perfection into the external world by checking and rechecking. So when homeopathy comes into play, what happens is we have to find remedies which have weak ego. because this problem arises because of weak ego. At the same time, there is very strict superego. So both the things has to be there. So we need remedy which have weak ego. At the same time, it could also have the harsh superego. So when minerals comes, all the carbon remedies, where the inner age is the fetal age, and then the fetus ego is not formed. So it represents the baby spends in the womb, so ego is not developed. So all the remedies which comes in the carbon or second series of periodic table, they can come or they can help to treat the OCD, like beryllium, boron, carbons, nitricums, and oxygen. Also the third column of periodic table, like the boron, alumina, scandium, yttrium, and lanthanum, and 15th column where nitrogen, phosphorus, arsenic, antimony, and bismuth they comes into play. Also 16th and 17th column. Why? Because here the ego becomes weak also due to old age. So OCD can also be in persons who are very old. Then the fourth row of periodic table. This fourth row depicts the school age of the person, and the bromium salt is there. Bromium has lots and lots of guilt and issues of punishment. So all the bromium salts can be thought of in OCDs. In plants, according to Cronquist classification, the fourth subclass known as the rosets, they also comes under the OCD. Why? Because the fourth subclass, it is the age where the superego develops. So dysfunction in this column may lead to morality with resultant guilt, excessive hardness, rigidity, and limitation. So main remedies are anacardium, mancinella, crotontic, gonium, etc. In animals, mammal group of remedies, especially the domesticated ones, because there is a feeling of something dirty within themselves. So they become self-critical. Because these mammals, they also fall in the school age, the morality part. So here superego is in constant conflict with the inner instincts. Also mollusks, which are obsessed with dirt. And the miasm part, the cancer miasm remedies. They have strong OCDs. Why? Because they want everything in control. They have desperate need for control. Also the leprous miasm, they feel shunned by society because of their disgust, dirty feelings. So OCD develops as an attempt to deny this inner feeling and create a good exterior. Example is leprominum, where it has very strong desire to wear white clothes. So the problem is, the basic problem of most of the mental diseases is the weak ego. And one must aim at strengthening the ego to live a healthy life.